Hi, this is Dr. Chin, and this is a lecture for Chapter 18, Career Choices. So, if you think about it, any way we look at it, young or old, male or female, white collar, blue collar, many people change their jobs throughout their employment career, then keep the same one. In fact, if you look at some informal estimates, um, these estimates suggest that people change their careers 5 to 7 times in a particular lifetime. Um, and with increased opportunities for technical and higher education, especially online education being more accessible, people changing their career paths is happening more often than not. So this chapter is about how tests of vocational choice or career development tests can help people make decisions about jobs that are more compatible with their likes and dislikes, more compatible with their aspirations and goals. Regardless of what tests we discuss in this chapter, the theme is the same. The purpose of these tests are to help people better understand their own interests and their personality traits and how we can match their interests and personality traits with a particular vocation or employment. And so that helps people to basically answer that question: what do you want to be when you grow up? So it's no surprise that career development is as much about what a person is as it is about what that person wants to do. It is the job of a vocational psychologist or a career counselor to examine people's interests and what will provide them with a higher level of job and life satisfaction. So, how do these professionals do that? Well, first, because test scores reveal something about that person's interests and where he or she might best fit, um, vocational psychologists or career counselors need to make sure that the test that they're using and interpreting is appropriate for his or her client. So, in other words, having psychometric support for use with their client population. And then, second, in conjunction with these test scores, it's also important to take into consideration the respondent's personality, values, and desires. And this is where a trained career counselor comes in to help put all these factors together to help their client move forward. So, to quote a well known career counseling and leading vocational psychologist, Dr. Krishak, the last thing about career counseling is the career. It really is all about the person. So, let's take a look at one of the best examples of vocational interest tests. Specifically, we'll talk about the Strong Interest Inventory, or the SII, which is a direct outgrowth of the Strong Vocational Interest Blank, or the SVIB, which was the first version of this test. So Strong created the Strong Vocational Interest Blank in his work to try to place military people in suitable jobs. And he was rather clever for his time, at the very least, in his design and development of the original SVIB in 1928, so close to 100 years ago. That's pretty amazing. He thought that to get a good reflection of one's vocational interests, questions should be asked about how much the test taker likes or dislikes various occupations, areas of study, leisure time activities, and then he found out how people who are currently in certain occupational occupations would have answered these very same questions. Underlying his work, of course, is the assumption that people who are successful in certain professions have a common profile of characteristics. But by empirically keying those answers from folks who are already working in those occupations with the responses of the test takers, he could pretty well look for a fit between people and occupation. So, was it perfect? Not really. But did it work pretty well? Yeah, definitely compared to other options that we had at that point. In the first five sections of the test, the response choice for the test taker is either a like, dislike, or indifferent, just as what is shown over here. Um, And so this is the part of the test that kind of looks like this table. And the respondent would simply indicate whether what their answer is for each of these things. Once the test is scored, and this is typically done by the publisher, but there's apparently a new product called iStart Strong that allows the scoring and interpretation to be done by the test taker. And then a long and detailed printout of the test taker scores and profile is made available. So scores are assigned to each of 6 general occupational teams. The 6 general occupational teams are as follows. So first of all, realistic. These people prefer activities that are practical and hands-on and result in tangible results. So people who are really good with their hands, such as building, repairing, and fixing. Example vocations would be being a carpenter, a roofer, a carpet installer. The second general team is investigative. These people prefer to solve problems that involve science and engineering, and they enjoy challenging situations that demand intellectual activity. So, example vocations for someone who would sky really high on this would be like a chemist or a biologist or engineer or maybe even a forensic scientist. Artistic is the third occupational team, and these people prefer activities that include the self expression of ideas. So, examples could include a musician or a filmmaker, and activities such as creating and enjoying art. The fourth occupational team is social, and people who score high on this are people who like to help others and find themselves attracted to situations where social causes are important. So, example vocations would include teachers, social workers, and psychologists. Enterprising is the fifth vocational team. These people prefer activities that include self management and leadership in addition to selling. So, example vocations could be, as you might guess, people involved in sales or advertising or even management. Conventional is the last occupational team, and these people like activities where structure and order are part of the work world. So, example vocations would include data analyses, secretaries, and accountants. So, for the exam, especially, there's going to be a couple of questions about this. I'll describe someone based on their personal characteristics, and I would want you to know which score they would probably score high on in these occupational teams. Now, it's interesting that Strong's interest inventory used these 6 teams in this score interpretation because it was actually John Holland who developed this career model using a hexagon featuring 6 vocational teams. So, Strong did a great job establishing criteria on validity by matching their profiles of test takers with people who currently hold certain jobs, but he did use overlay quite a bit of theoretical concepts from John Holland. Now, John Holland's 6 occupational teams turn up again and again in the literature on vocational testing, and you'll see that once we review some of the major testing instruments at the end of today's lecture. And there's a good reason as to why his teams come up again and again. They're pretty clearly thought out. They have an empirically validated foundation for assessing important clues to career development preferences. So, John Holland himself designed his own measure called the self-directed search, also known as the SDS, that maps onto these 6 teams. What is also notable about this particular test is that it is designed to be self-administered, self-scored, and self-interpreted, really taking this important area of assessment directly to the test taker. Now, in this hexagon, you can see how the different vocational teams are organized in a particular way. And they're organized in a way in this hexagon so that adjacent teams are similar to one another and opposite teams are dissimilar to one another. So, for example, social and artistic occupations would seem to have several things in common. That's why they are adjacent to one another. People who select a particular vocational track within either of these teams, so maybe a filmmaker, if you're in the artistic team, might be comfortable in the vocation that is pointing towards the other as well, such as being a teacher, which would fall under the social team. Once Holland developed these teams, he could look at individuals in particular vocations, administer his tests, and find out the patterns of teams for that vocation. And the result is that individuals can be assigned a three-character code, also known as the Holland Code, that characterizes an individual's strengths relative to the descriptions within Holland's 6 different teams. For example, with a code of RES, you would most resemble the realistic type, less resemble the enterprising type, and even less resemble the social type. You'll do something similar to this in your 4th quarterly assignment. Holland and his co-authors compiled a dictionary of these codes called the Dictionary of Occupational Codes with close to 13,000 occupations. This table here is just a sample of the selection of codes and the accompanying and suggested occupations for each one of those. So if you're a director of a daycare center, these are the 3 top teams that you would have. So enterprising 1, social being 2nd, and conventional being 3rd. Side note, if you ever want to research jobs, figure out what they pay, figure out what is a job prospect, and more, you can visit the Department of Labor's website on dol.gov. You can view the Occupational Outlook Handbook on bls.gov/ooh/. You can find out pretty neat things such as the prospects of being a welder. It's pretty good actually, with a medium salary in 2015 for about $38,000 per year. You'll also find out that the prospects of being a physician is really good as well, with a medium salary. So that's a typo right there. I'll correct that before I post the slide. So a median salary in 2017 of $200,000. That's a lot of money. So if you ever want to do research and figure out all these cool things, check out these websites. Now, Richard Nelson Bowles. Now, he's apparently a name to be reckoned with because he wrote one of the best books, a book that is pretty well known amongst career counselors and vocational psychologists, called What Color is Your Parachute? His book was so well disseminated and used and quoted that in 1995, the Library of Congress placed his book within the canon of classes American self-improvement literature, a list that was compiled as part of a nationwide reading incentive program. Based on reviews, his book apparently provides pretty unconventional but very pragmatic advice, and written in a very whimsical narrative style, which makes it a very enjoyable read, which is why I think Salkind highly recommends getting this book. And in this chapter, he reviews 5 of Richard Nelson Bowles' rules about taking any vocational tests. So these are just some practical suggestions for you to consider. So number 1, first, recognize that not all tests are right for all people. Some people, in fact, hate tests altogether. So the test itself has to be the kind in which the test taker is willing to invest the time and energy for the results to be useful. So if you're going to Christmas tree the entire test, then it's definitely not going to be useful for you. So second, no test is a test for everyone. Some tests, maybe because the format is better liked, or perhaps, or could be for another reason, may provide different results than other tests. Career development, according to Richard Nelson Bowles, isn't so finite a process that one test, no matter how good it is, will provide all the answers. Third, Bowles believed in the importance of trusting your instinct or intuition, and there's actually empirical evidence supporting this, especially when it comes to complex decisions. You may have a career choice that fits, meets all of your X's and dots. Feels like, I mean, theoretically it should be a good choice, but if your intuition is saying no, there may be something that the pre-conscious or the unconscious part of your brain is telling you that maybe this is not the bad thing, then it may be hard for you to express. So just know that no test will provide a definitive 100% direction in which way to go, only suggestions that you can incorporate into your own life circumstances. Fourth, remember that you're the only one and there is no one like you when it comes to test scores. You may not be the only one to get that score, but that's the only score that you get. Treat your unique qualities as important factors in consideration of the test profile that it comes from the testing. Last but not least, Richard Bowles reminds his readers that um, at the end of the day, remember that it's only a score. It is an estimate of whatever latent construct that it is that you're trying to measure related to your vocation. But realize that or remember that there is a lot more to deciding on a career path or choosing one track over another than just one score. Really, the more you know yourself, the more useful the test outcomes will be. So, might not hurt to do a few different tests to let some time or take some time to just kind of let all this information kind of simmer down um, and just try to make the best decision that you can, not forgetting your intuition. Now, having said that, career and vocational tests can really be useful tools to help people identify teams in their work aspirations. Just remember that these tests are not magic. They cannot identify exactly what people want to do, but they can help. So let's review 5 well-known vocational tests to get a sense of the similarities and differences between these tests. So let's start with the strong interest inventory. We talked about this earlier. This is the first test that we discussed, and as mentioned before, its purpose is to identify general areas of interest as well as specific activities and occupations by providing 6 general occupational teams. This test can be administered with respondents 16 years and above. Interestingly, if you look in the history, a man's form of the measure was published first before a woman's form followed in 1933. If you want to get more information on this test, go to cpp.com/product/strong/index.aspx. Next is a self-directed search, and as mentioned before, this was designed by John Holland. It is a vocational inventory that will also produce vocational interests into, and will classify them into 6 categories. Um, this test notably has a lower age range compared to the strong interest inventory with a lower limit of 12 years of age. And a unique feature of this test is that the self-directed search has loads of foreign translations, including a Braille edition for those who are blind. So those are just some similarities and differences on those two tests that we have covered so far. Let's look at the Cooter Occupational Interest Survey, or the KOIS. The KOIS measures interest in careers that require advanced technical or college training and is also based on Holland's model of 6 personality factors. This test can be administered with kids in grade 10 through adulthood. In terms of items, the test takers are presented with 100 triads of activities and asked to select the activity they like the most and the activity they like the least. After the respondent completes the test, the KOIS yields information of 4 scales: dependability, vocational interest estimates, occupations, and college majors relevant to these occupations. So it gives you information not just on the vocational interest, but also on these 3 added constructs as well. Now, fourth is the Armed Services Civilian Vocational Interest Survey. And this test organizes interests and makes career decisions about military and civilian jobs on a number of occupational groups, and there are 8 to be exact. Ultimately, the purpose of this test is to explore the overlap between civilian and military jobs. And this test can be administered with teenagers in high school through adulthood, especially useful if an individual is considering building a career in the military or is trying to transition from military to civilian life. Last but not least, we have the Campbell Interest and Skills Survey. The CISS focuses not just on the importance of self-reported interests, but also on self-reported skills, both thought to be crucial in an individual's career planning, and there is empirical evidence supporting that as well. It's not just interest, but your skill abilities too. This measure contains 200 interest items and 120 skill items, and this test can be used with individuals 15 years and up. So, in summary, there are multiple factors that will steer a person into one career path and another person into a completely different one. It's tough at best, but skilled vocational psychologists and career counselors recognize that career directions depend on your personality traits, your values, your interests, and other factors that work in tandem. These same people have developed a good set of tools that provide a reliable and valid assessment, terrific starting points for all the possibilities that one should consider. And that's pretty much it for my lecture for this chapter. Um, I hope you found this particular chapter useful, or hopefully it will be useful at some point because statistically speaking, it looks like a lot of us are probably going to end up at least changing a few jobs, or at least one job, if anything. And that's it for now. And this pretty much concludes this is the last lecture for this entire class as well. I want to thank you for uh, walking with me, for journeying with me through this whole entire course, really, in regards to psychological testing. Um, you guys have my email, you guys have my contact information. Psychometrics and psychological testing is a big part of what I do. So if at any point in the future you'd be interested in wanting to, come talk to me, I'll ask questions. I'll be happy to chat with you. I'm always happy to meet with my students, especially with my online students whom I don't usually get to interact with a lot. So that's all for now. And all the best in the quizzes and the quarterly assignments. I'll keep you guys posted as we wrap up the rest of the semester. Thank you and have a good rest of the day.